to deal with the economic equality issue.
His questions are vital questions.
How will a President Hillary Clinton deal with the police reform?
I'm here today because I represent a district that has one of the highest number of people on federal food stamps and has one of the lowest life expectancies in Washington State. Right now, babies are being born in Sacred Heart, in Deaconess, and Holy Family, and people are projecting bleak outcomes for the educational attainment, for whether or not they'll live long, whether they'll be incarcerated, just because of the zip code that they were born in. Two of the poorest census tracts in Washington State are in Spokane. It's time we look into the eyes of the parents and the children born in Hilliard, West Central, East Central, and all over the state in America and say, it doesn't have to be this way. I'm here today because of what I feel in my heart, in my gut, and what I believe is in the best interest of Spokane in this nation. Bernie Sanders is the only presidential candidate with a vision for America that works for all of us. Bernie Sanders is the only... Too few have held on to too much wealth and power for too long. It's time for a radical shift. As Vice Chair of the Health Care Committee in the House, I stand with Senator Sanders that health care is a right, that housing should be a right. And when a lot of people tell you that no one working 40 hours a week should live in poverty, we all know that no one should live in poverty in America. And now I'm one of the few legislators in the Washington State still paying off my student loans, and I hear now you. I'm one of the few Bernie hears you. In the Washington State legislature still paying off my student loans, and I hear you. Bernie hears you. Graduation should be a time of happiness. It should not be a time when you have to choose between the career you want to pursue or whether or not you can start a family or purchase a home. From childhood hunger to campaign finance, from corporate welfare to climate change, our country is walking a dangerous path. Bernie Sanders is leading a political revolution that can get us back on track. That's why I'm proud to come here today and publicly endorse Bernie Sanders for the next President of the United States. We're standing up to bigotry and hatred and advancing racial equity, and we're fighting to hold corporations accountable and make sure they pay their fair share. So I'm here to support Bernie, but I want you to know something. I'm also here to support you. I'm so incredibly proud of you for the movement you have built, and I want you to know that a new generation of progressive legislators will have your back. But it is so very clear we can't do this without you. This is a grassroots effort, but it's more about filling up arenas and stadiums for rallies. Democracy is a participatory sport, and we need each and every one of you to attend your precinct caucus Saturday. And guess what? There's a lot of work that can still be done between now and Saturday. So if you can not just commit to attending your caucus, but you can take just one more action. Ask that neighbor who has talked to you about supporting Bernie if you can carpool with them to caucus. Go down to the Monroe office and see if you can do get out to caucus calls or door knocks. Commit to taking Bernie's message directly to the doorsteps and dinner tables of caucus goers. And with that, it is my distinct honor to introduce someone who will deliver on a promise to give everyone in Spokane a chance to thrive. The next President of the United States, Bernie Sanders.
Thanks for being here. Let me thank Abigail Crawford. Let me thank Deanna Brown and Marcus Riccelli for that wonderful introduction. Marcus, thank you so much. Okay, let's get to business. Here is the business. Number one, we are all going to do everything that we can to make certain that a Republican does not occupy the White House. And in order to do that, we need the strongest Democratic candidate possible. And you are looking at him. Now, you know, campaigns are funny things, and a lot of people say a lot of things. And there are people who, for very good reasons, like Hillary Clinton, and that's fine, people who like me, and that's fine. But if we talk about the issue of which candidate is best able to defeat Donald Trump, there really should not be a whole lot of debate about that. Poll after poll after poll makes it clear that we do much better not only against Trump, but against other Republican candidates. CNN poll the other day had Hillary Clinton defeating Trump by 12 points. That's very good. We beat him by 20 points. Secretary Clinton was losing by 6 points to John Kasich. We were beating him by 6 points. Cruz by 13 points. Ted Cruz is running home that we got to clear the air with. We are the strongest candidate. And if people are worried about that, as they should, we're going to work together to get the nomination. Number two, we are gaining a lot of momentum. Just in the last week, we have closed the gap with Secretary Clinton by about 25 delegates. We won overwhelming, unbelievable victories in Utah and Idaho with over 75% of the vote. And while we lost in Arizona, you add all that together and you add Democrats abroad, I think we gained about 25 delegates in the last week. And now we are coming to the great state of Washington on Saturday morning. What we do well, but when they don't, we don't. So I would ask all of you, on Saturday morning. I guess the caucuses begin at 10. Get there earlier, bring out your... I want to mention to you all that just today we received the endorsement, and I'm very proud of this, of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. They're one of the great and important unions on the West Coast, and we thank them for their support, as we do many of the other unions that are supporting us. Okay. Now, what this campaign is about, and why I believe we are doing as well as we are, is we are treating the American people with intelligence. And maybe even more radically, for modern politics, we are telling the truth. Now, what the truth is, whether it's in our personal lives or whether it's in our political lives, the truth is not always pleasant. So I can come before you and tell you some jokes and tell you about all the people who are supporting me. And maybe we have some music and all that stuff, and I get votes. But that's not what we're trying to do. What we are trying to look at the harsh realities of American life. And by the way, those realities do not appear on television very often. And one of the points that we have made throughout this campaign is when we deal with the reality of American life, you can't count on media to tell you that reality. You have got to go into your own hearts and souls and determine what that reality is. You make that reality, you analyze that reality, not the stuff that you see on television, because that often is not the reality facing this country. So in a sense, in a very profound sense, what this campaign is redefining reality. All right, what is reality in America today? Number one, everybody here in this room believes in democracy. We appreciate so much, and I speak to you as the former chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. We appreciate so much the sacrifices men and women in the military have made for so long in defending American democracy. I was in San Diego the other day, and I was introduced to a man in a wheelchair. I believe he is in his late 90s, and he fought in World War II, and you get chills in your own body meeting somebody whose courage has helped save America. But when we talk about democracy and the sacrifices that so many people have made, here is a truth that everybody here has got to appreciate, not a pleasant truth. And that is, as a result of this disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, we now have a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining American democracy. Democracy, we have had a long, long road that we've traveled since the inception of this country in terms of what democracy means. You all know that when this country was founded, the only people who could vote were wealthy white males. And the struggle for hundreds of years has been to expand democracy. That has been the struggle. And yet today, as a result of this Citizens United Supreme Court decision, what we are seeing is billionaires buying elections. And what this campaign is about is asking the American people not to take what we see in front of us, the status quo of our lives. Don't believe that that has to be the status quo in years to come. We can make change. So when you read in the paper that the Koch brothers or some other billionaires are spending hundreds of millions of dollars, do not accept that as what American politics should be about. When billionaires buy elections or try to buy elections, that is not democracy, that is oligarchy. And we will not allow that to take place. And when we talk about democracy, it is important for all of us to know that we as a nation, one of the great democracies in the world, today we have one of the lowest voter turnouts of any major country on earth. And despite that, what you're seeing all over this country is Republican governors trying to suppress the vote. What we want to do is get more people to participate in the political process. They want fewer people. So they are passing all kinds of legislation that makes it harder for people of color, makes it harder for young people, for old people, for poor people to vote. And that is absolutely disgraceful. And fair election where everybody can vote. You should get out of politics and get another job. Now, just give you an example, and I honestly do not know, and hopefully there will be an investigation on this, and I would like to see this investigation. As you know, just on Tuesday, there was an election, primary election in Arizona. People were waiting online for 5 hours to cast a ballot. 5 hours. We received an email from a friend of a staff member of mine, waiting online 5 hours, and there were people behind her. Now, whether this was intentional or it was just incompetence, I don't know. But when people show up at the polls, they should be allowed to vote and not have to spend half their day waiting for that. And that is why, together, one of our great missions, and it ties into everything else, if we have a large voter turnout, if working class people and young people participate, in November of 2014, the last general election we had, 63% of the American people didn't vote, 80% of young people didn't vote. All right? And surprise, surprise, Republicans won a landslide victory, and that's what they want. They want people not to vote. They want big money to buy elections. Well, on Saturday, let's send them a message. We are going to vote. Campaign finance system, not just a low voter turnout, it is also a rigged economy. A rigged economy. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is what you're, again, not going to see terribly often on television. And that is that we have the most grotesquely unfair distribution of wealth and income of any major country on earth. Now, you know, in every society, and probably it always will be, they're going to be rich and poor and people in the middle. But here is what you got today in America. You have the top 1/10 of 1%. Not 1%, 1/10 of 1% now owning almost as much wealth as the bottom people, owning more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million Americans. Now, when you talk about the rigged economy, it is not only distribution of wealth and income. That's part of it. But it is the fact that the rich get richer while many people in the middle class and working class get poorer. Let me give you one example of what I mean, and I could give you a dozen, but here's one example. The wealthiest family in America is who? Anyone know? Good. Smart group of people. Walton family owning Walmart is the wealthiest family in America. The wages that they pay their workers are so low that many of their employees are forced to go on food stamps, Medicaid, and subsidized housing. Here is what a rigged economy is about. Who pays in higher taxes for that Medicaid and food stamps for those workers? You do. So here is one of many examples where the middle class pays more in taxes to subsidize the company owned by the wealthiest family in America. That's absurd. Working families should not have to subsidize a multi-billionaire family. And I say to the Walton family, you know, get off of welfare, pay your workers a living wage. And again, when we think outside of the box, ask yourself. So here is a radical idea. You ready for a radical idea? Together, what we will do is create an economy that minimum wage. But when we talk about basic and fundamental problems facing our country, it is the state of our democracy and a corrupt campaign finance system. It is a rigged, has been declining. We have 47 million people living in poverty. So what we've got to think about there is, why is it that in the wealth and why are 19 and 20 unemployment rate? We have millions of young people today, not unarmed people, being shot by police officers. Now, I have been a mayor for 8 years, and I've worked with police officers all over my state and all over this country. The truth is, the vast majority of police officers are honest, and they are hardworking, and they have a very difficult job. It is not easy. Millions of people in this country have received police records for possession of marijuana. And a police record is no laughing matter, because if you're young, you go walking into an employer, you want a job, and the employer asks you about your record, you got to talk about it. And that makes it harder for you to get that job. If you don't get a job, you don't have income. If you don't have income, you're going to do something not good in order to survive. Now, right now, under the Federal Controlled Substance Act, some of you may know it, most of you probably don't, marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug right alongside of heroin. That does not make sense to me, and that's why I've introduced legislation to take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. State of Vermont, neighboring New Hampshire, have an epidemic of addiction to heroin, and we are losing people every single day to overdose. Say, Bernie, how did it happen? A whole lot of money. My dad worked in this country. If we do not get our act together, the young woman the other day, 45, 50, smart people, brave people, said, you know what? All of our children, not just the wealthy, should be able to get an education. And we are going to make public schools free for first grade through 12th grade. And that was an extraordinary development. But today, in 2016, the world is different than it was 50 years ago. 50 years ago, you had a high school degree, you were in pretty good shape. You can go out and get a good job. The world, the economy, and universities. European countries exist in Scandinavia. They are smart enough to be investing in their young people so that the economy they will have in future years will be strong. We should do the same thing. And then we have, in addition, we have millions of people today carrying horrific levels of student debt, which they are paying off over decades. I talked to a guy in Nevada many, many months ago. He has been paying off his student debt for 25 years. That debt is higher today than it was when he took it out. I talked to people who have become doctors and dentists, and God knows we need a lot of doctors and we need a lot of dentists. They are leaving school hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. So what we have got to do is give those people the opportunity to refinance their loans at the lowest possible interest rates, substantially lowering student debt. This campaign is listening to our Latino brothers and sisters. And what they are telling me, I know a little bit about the immigrant experience. My father came to this country at 17 from Poland without a nickel in his pocket. Our job is to create an immigration system which unites families, not divides families. And if the Congress does not do its job, I will use the executive powers given to the President to do everything I can. And one of the first things that I will do is end the deportations that we are seeing right now. This campaign is listening to our brothers and sisters in the African American community. And what they are telling me is, how could it be that after spending trillions of dollars in a war in Iraq that we never should have gotten into in the first place, how does it happen that communities like Flint, Michigan, and many others, heavily minority communities, are falling apart right now? How does it happen that we have a water system in Flint which is poisoning its children, and that Flint is not unique, there are other systems? How does it happen that schools in the inner city are falling, literally crumbling, from a physical point of view, and are providing inadequate education to the children? How does it happen that in the inner cities unemployment rates are sky high, and that a significant number of people end up in jail rather than in college? That is what they are asking me, and they are absolutely right. It is time to change our national priorities. It is time to invest in our inner cities rather than give tax breaks to billionaires. Listening to the Native American community. I don't have to tell anybody here who has studied American history for 5 minutes that the way that we have treated Native Americans is absolutely disgraceful. And this goes back to before the beginning of our country. Native American people have been cheated, have been lied to, their treaties have been abrogated, and now is the time to change our policies toward the Native American people. Just think for a moment what we owe the first Americans in terms of the best aspects of our culture. Who has taught us more about respect for the environment and working with nature, not against nature? If elected president, there will be a fundamental change in the relationship of the U.S. government to the Native American people. I am a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment, and I will tell you what most of you already know, and that is the scientists are virtually unanimous. Climate change is real, and it is caused by human activity, and it is already doing devastating harm in this country and around the world. And what the scientists tell us, if we do not get our act together in a very short period of time, what we are going to see is a planet which is 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer by the end of this century. What we are going to see is more drought, floods, extreme weather disturbances, acidification of the ocean, rising sea levels, and more international conflict as people fight for limited natural resources. In my view, and this is not just an American issue, this is a global issue, we have the moral responsibility to leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable to future generations. Did that generation, when they knew what was going on, why did they allow it to happen? And that is why the United States has got to work with Russia, China, India, other countries to take on the fossil fuel industry and transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. It is a right of all people, not a privilege. And my view is there is something absurd when the United States is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people. Today, despite the gains of the Affordable Care Act, and I'm on the committee that helped write the Affordable Care Act, 29 million people still have no health insurance. Many of you and millions of other Americans are underinsured, something we talk about very little. That means you have high deductibles and you have high copayments. Is that right? And that means if you don't have any money and you have a high deductible or a high copayment, you may not go to the doctor when you should. And all of that adds up to the fact that we lose thousands and thousands of people every year who die because they walk into the doctor's office too late. And on top of all of that, you got the drug companies ripping us off in an unconscionable way, charging us by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Today in America, if you can believe it, this is how crazy it is. 1 out of 5 Americans who gets a prescription from a doctor cannot afford to fill that prescription. There are people who are dying because they cannot afford the medicine that they need, and yet last year, the 3 major drug companies earned $45 billion in profit. And then on top of all of that, the United States ends up spending much, much more per capita than do the people of any other country. 3 times, almost 3 times what the British spend, 50% more than the French, much more than the Canadians. And that is why I believe that this country must move toward a Medicare for all single-payer program. I don't want a super PAC. We raise our money, our campaign funding, in a way that for modern politics is revolutionary. And that is, we have now received well over 5 million individual contributions. That is more financial support from working people and the middle class, not powerful special interests. To paraphrase Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, this is a campaign of the people, by the people, and for the people. Now, if we believe, as I do, that money in politics today has an unbelievably corrupting influence, it is important to look at how Secretary Clinton gets her campaign funds. She has several super PACs. Her largest one in the last reporting period indicated that they had received $25 million in one filing period from special interest, $15 million from Wall Street. As many of you may know, she has also given speeches on Wall Street for $225,000 a speech. Now, for $225,000 a speech, probably a pretty good speech, don't you think? Probably a speech which will reveal the darkest secrets of humanity and move us in an entirely new direction. Probably a speech written in Shakespearean prose. And that is why I think that that great speech should be made available to all of the people. And Secretary Clinton has said, well, she will make her transcripts available if everybody else does. So, let me announce to you today, I am prepared to release all of the transcripts of the speeches I gave to Wall Street. There weren't any. I don't know why. Can't figure out. Wall Street has not invited me to give a speech for $225,000. I'm waiting. I got my cell phone on here. I am waiting for that call. But probably the reason I haven't gotten that call is that if I did go before Wall Street, I would release the transcript. And what that transcript would say is that at a time when 3 out of the 4 largest banks in America are bigger than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail, now is the time to break up the major banks on Wall Street. Secretary Clinton and I disagree very fundamentally on foreign policy issues. We were both in Congress. She was in the Senate. I was in the House in 2002 when the most important foreign policy debate of modern history took place, and that was the war in Iraq. I listened very carefully to what Bush and Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and all these guys had to say. I didn't believe them. I voted against the war. Secretary Clinton heard the same evidence. She voted for the war. And in a debate that we had a couple of months ago, she actually mentioned how pleased she was to get very kind words from former Secretary of State Kissinger against the war. And that maybe tells you what her foreign policy is about. I happen to think Kissinger was one of the most destructive secretaries of state in American history. And trust me, he will not be saying very kind words about my Secretary of State. We have in this country today a major crisis in terms of clean drinking water. I believe that as soon as possible, we have got to phase out fracking. I think the evidence is overwhelming that fracking is harming our aquifers. Secretary Clinton has not only supported fracking, but as Secretary of State, tried to push that technology on other countries. We have a disagreement on that issue. Donald Trump will not become President of the United States. And he will not become president because the American people will not elect someone who insults Mexicans, who insults and denigrates Muslims. And let me be very clear. We are at war today against ISIS, a barbaric terrorist organization. We are not at war against the Muslim religion. And I do not want and will not tolerate Muslims in this country living in fear from hate language and terrible actions. Donald Trump will not be elected president because the American people will not vote for somebody who insults women. Who insults veterans, who insults African Americans. And I hope everybody here has not forgotten the disgraceful role that Trump played in the so-called birther movement. Sometimes this was before he was a candidate, but let's not forget that. What that effort was about, which is an ugly, vicious effort, was to delegitimize President Barack Obama. That's what it was. In other words, what it wasn't saying we disagree with Obama. That's fine. We all disagree with everybody. You can do that. But what he was trying to tell the American people is that Barack Obama, our first African-American president, was not a legitimate president of the United States. That was a disgraceful act. Now, I have always found it interesting that my dad, as I mentioned before, came to this country from Poland. I am the son of an immigrant. Barack Obama is the son of an immigrant. His father was born in Kenya. I find it very interesting. Nobody has asked me for my birth certificate. Think it might have something to do with the color of my skin. I think so. Trump will not be elected president because the American people instinctually, in a very deep sense, understand that bringing our people together, black or white or Latino, Asian American, Native American, bringing our people together, gay and straight, men and women, people born in America, people who have come to America, that effort of creating a cohesive nation will always trump dividing us up. And the American people will not elect Trump because they understand that in this country, we are at our best when we support each other, when we help each other. When I'm there for you and you are there for me, when we're there for each other's kids. That sense of togetherness always trumps selfishness. And most importantly, I think the people of our great nation have learned much from all of the great religions in this world, whether it is Christianity or Judaism or Islam or Buddhism, whatever it may be. And at the end of the day, what all of these religions say is that love trumps hatred. My friends, we are at a moment in history where our country can no longer support establishment politics or establishment economics. We need to go beyond the status quo. We need a political revolution where millions of people become deeply engaged in the political process and the fight for the future of our nation. No president not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. The powers of Wall Street, of the pharmaceutical industry, of corporate America, of wealthy campaign contributors, of the corporate media are so great that no president can do it alone in terms of doing what has to be done for the middle class and working people of this country. The only way, and I'm the only presidential candidate who will tell you this, the only way we transform America is when millions of people from coast to coast stand up and say loudly and clearly that we need a government that represents all of us, not just a handful of wealthy campaign contributors. On Saturday morning, there will be a lot of delegates at stake here in the great state of Washington. I believe that the ideas and the issues we are raising have the support of the overwhelming majority of the people. If you and all Washingtonians come on out on Saturday morning, we are going to win a major victory here, and Washington will be a major step forward to the White House. Thank you all very much.